Lisa Chen had always been the kind of person who found joy in simple things. Every morning, she would wake up in her cozy one-bedroom apartment, make herself a cup of instant coffee, and get ready for work. Her closet wasn't filled with designer labels or expensive shoes. Instead, she had a small collection of practical clothes that she had picked up from discount stores and clearance sales over the years. She worked as a librarian at the public library downtown. It wasn't a glamorous job, and it certainly didn't pay much, but Lisa loved it. She loved the smell of old books, the quiet atmosphere, and most of all, helping people find stories that would transport them to different worlds. Every day, she would commute to work on the city bus, watching the world go by through the window while listening to audiobooks on her phone. Lisa had been married to David for 3 years now. They had met in the most ordinary way possible, at a small community book reading event. David had been sitting in the back row, quietly listening, and after the event they had struck up a conversation about their favorite authors. He was soft-spoken and kind, with an easy smile that made Lisa feel comfortable right away. David worked from home, which Lisa always thought was convenient. He spent most of his days in their small home office, typing away on his computer in sweatpants and old t-shirts. He drove a beat-up Honda that had seen better days, and he never complained about their modest lifestyle. They didn't go on expensive vacations or eat at fancy restaurants. Instead, they spent their evenings cooking together, taking walks in the park and reading side by side on their worn-out couch. Money was tight, but they were happy. At least Lisa was happy. She had learned long ago that happiness didn't come from material things. It came from being content with what you had and appreciating the people in your life. But not everyone in her family saw things the way she did. Lisa's cousin, Rebecca, lived in a completely different world. Rebecca had married a wealthy businessman 10 years ago, and since then she had made it her mission to let everyone know just how successful she was. She lived in a massive house in the suburbs, the kind with a circular driveway, perfectly manicured lawns, and more rooms than anyone could possibly need. Every summer, Rebecca threw a garden party at her estate. It was supposed to be a family gathering, a chance for everyone to catch up and spend time together. But over the years, these parties had become less about family and more about Rebecca showing off everything she had acquired. The guest list always included wealthy neighbors, business associates, and anyone else Rebecca wanted to impress. When the invitation arrived in the mail, Lisa held it in her hands for a long moment, debating whether she should go. The envelope itself was fancy, made of thick, cream-colored paper with gold lettering. Inside, the invitation was printed on expensive cardstock, announcing Rebecca's annual summer soiree. Lisa hadn't seen most of her extended family in over a year. Part of her wanted to reconnect with her aunts, uncles, and cousins, but another part of her dreaded the inevitable comparisons and judgmental looks she would receive. Still, she decided to give it a chance. Maybe this year would be different. When she told David about the invitation, he offered to come with her. "Are you sure you want to go alone?" he asked, looking up from his laptop. "I don't mind tagging along. We can suffer through it together." Lisa smiled and shook her head. "No, you'd be bored out of your mind. It's just going to be a bunch of relatives talking about their kids' achievements and showing off their new cars. I'll be fine. I'll just stay for a couple of hours and then head home." David looked uncertain but nodded. "Okay, but call me if you need me. I can come pick you up anytime." "I will," Lisa promised, giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. The day of the party arrived faster than Lisa had hoped. She stood in front of her closet staring at her limited options. Most of her dresses were several years old, and none of them were what anyone would call fashionable. She finally settled on a simple floral sundress that she had bought on sale last summer. It was nothing special, but it was clean and presentable. She paired it with her most comfortable sandals, the ones that were starting to show their age but were still wearable. Looking at herself in the mirror, Lisa felt a familiar wave of insecurity wash over her. She knew she didn't look like she belonged at one of Rebecca's fancy parties, but she pushed the feeling aside. She was going to see family, not walk a runway. David gave her an encouraging smile as she grabbed her purse. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You're biased," Lisa replied with a laugh. "Maybe, but I'm also right." Since they only had one car and David might need it, Lisa decided to take an Uber to Rebecca's house. As the car drove through the city and into the wealthy suburbs, Lisa watched the houses get bigger and bigger. Manicured lawns replaced small yards. Luxury cars sat in driveways instead of regular sedans. By the time they reached Rebecca's neighborhood, Lisa felt like she had entered a completely different world. The Uber driver pulled up to the gate of Rebecca's estate, and Lisa felt her stomach tighten. Through the wrought iron gates, she could see dozens of people milling about on the lawn. Women in expensive dresses and high heels, men in polo shirts and designer sunglasses. Everyone looked like they had just stepped out of a magazine. Lisa paid the driver and walked through the open gate. Almost immediately, she felt out of place. Her simple dress seemed shabby compared to the designer outfits around her. Her discount sandals looked cheap next to the expensive heels the other women wore. She clutched her plain purse a little tighter and made her way toward the crowd. Rebecca spotted her almost instantly. She was holding court near the outdoor bar, surrounded by well-dressed guests. When she saw Lisa approaching, her perfectly made-up face broke into a wide smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Lisa, oh my goodness, you actually came!" Rebecca's voice carried across the lawn, causing several people to turn and look. She rushed over, her designer heels clicking on the stone pathway. "I wasn't sure you'd make it. I know it's such a long way from your neighborhood." The way she said your neighborhood made it sound like Lisa lived in some distant, inferior place. Before Lisa could respond, Rebecca had already moved on, linking her arm through Lisa's and practically dragging her toward the crowd. "Everyone, this is my cousin Lisa," Rebecca announced loudly. "She lives in the city. Isn't that quaint?" Lisa forced a smile and gave a small wave to the group of strangers staring at her. She could feel their eyes taking in every detail of her appearance, silently judging her worn dress and simple accessories. "Can I get you something to drink?" Rebecca asked, though she was already gesturing to a uniformed server. "We have champagne, wine, craft cocktails." "Oh, but maybe you'd prefer something simpler. I think we have some regular beer somewhere." "Water is fine," Lisa said quietly. Rebecca laughed as if Lisa had made a joke. "Water, how refreshingly modest. That's so you, Lisa." As the afternoon wore on, Lisa found herself drifting from group to group, trying to find a conversation she could comfortably join. But everywhere she went, she felt like an outsider looking in. People talked about their vacation homes, their children's private schools, their latest purchases. When anyone asked Lisa what she did for a living, their interest visibly waned when she mentioned working at a library. She finally found her Aunt Patricia near the buffet table, helping herself to fancy appetizers that Lisa couldn't even identify. Patricia had always been kind to her as a child, and Lisa hoped for a friendly face in the crowd. "Aunt Patricia, it's so good to see you," Lisa said warmly. Patricia looked up, and for a moment Lisa saw genuine warmth in her eyes. But then Patricia's gaze traveled down to Lisa's outfit and something shifted. "Oh, Lisa dear, how are you?" Patricia's voice was kind, but there was a hint of pity in it. "Still working at that little library?" "Yes, I love it there," Lisa replied, trying to sound enthusiastic. "That's wonderful that you find fulfillment in simple work," Patricia said, patting Lisa's arm. "Not everyone needs a high-powered career to be happy, and that dress is lovely. Vintage? It's just a few years old," Lisa admitted. "Well, it's very you, practical." Patricia smiled, but there was something condescending about it. "You know, I have some designer pieces that I don't wear anymore. They're a few seasons old, but they're still in good condition. I'd be happy to give them to you. It would be better than letting them sit in my closet." Lisa felt her cheeks flush. She knew Patricia meant well, but the offer felt like charity. Like she was a project that needed fixing. "That's very kind of you. But I'm fine," Lisa said, keeping her voice steady. Before Patricia could respond, Rebecca's voice rang out across the garden again, calling everyone to gather around. Lisa reluctantly made her way over, hoping whatever announcement Rebecca had planned wouldn't last long. She was already counting down the minutes until she could politely leave. Rebecca stood on the raised patio, tapping her champagne glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. The tinkling sound cut through the chatter, and gradually the guests fell silent. Lisa stood near the back of the crowd, hoping to remain invisible. "Thank you all so much for coming to our little gathering," Rebecca began, her voice dripping with false modesty. Everyone knew there was nothing little about this party. "Before we continue with the festivities, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge some exciting family news." Lisa's stomach sank. She had a bad feeling about where this was going. "My daughter Ashley has just been accepted to Princeton," Rebecca announced proudly. The crowd erupted in applause, and Ashley, a young woman in her early 20s wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Lisa's monthly rent, gave a modest wave. Of course, we made a generous donation to their new library wing, but I'm sure Ashley's grades had something to do with it too. Rebecca laughed at her own joke, and the crowd joined in politely. Lisa clapped along, genuinely happy for Ashley, even if the way Rebecca announced it left a bitter taste in her mouth. And speaking of education and success, Rebecca continued, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Lisa. I think it's important that we also recognize those in our family who are, shall we say, taking a different path in life. Lisa's heart began to pound. Please don't, she thought. Please just move on. My dear cousin Lisa is here today. Rebecca gestured toward her and every head turned to look. Lisa wanted to disappear. Lisa has chosen a much simpler life than most of us. She works at a public library, can you imagine? And her husband, well, he works from home doing something with computers. It's all very modest and humble. The way Rebecca said modest and humble made it sound like an affliction rather than a choice. A few people in the crowd exchanged glances, some sympathetic, others judgmental. I think it's wonderful that not everyone in the family feels the need to chase money and success. Rebecca continued, her smile never wavering. Some people are just content with less, and there's nothing wrong with that. We can't all be high achievers. Lisa felt her face burning. She wanted to speak up, to defend herself, but the words stuck in her throat. Around her, people were nodding along with Rebecca's words, as if she were making some profound point about life choices instead of thinly disguised insults. In fact, Rebecca went on, clearly enjoying the attention, I think we should all help out our less fortunate family members when we can. Lisa, dear, if you ever need anything at all, you just let me know. I'm sure we can find some odd jobs around the estate that might pay a bit better than library work. And I know my husband's company is always looking for entry-level workers. The crowd murmured in agreement, as if Rebecca had just offered some generous act of charity, instead of publicly humiliating her cousin. Lisa stood frozen, feeling like every eye in the garden was on her, judging her clothes, her job, her entire life. Ashley, Rebecca's daughter, walked over to where Lisa was standing. Unlike her mother, Ashley had always seemed relatively nice, though they rarely spoke. But now standing in front of Lisa with a group of her equally well-dressed friends, Ashley wore an expression that was hard to read. So, Lisa, you're still at the library? Ashley asked, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. I remember you talking about that years ago. I just assumed it was temporary, like something you were doing until you found a real career. It is a real career, Lisa said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. I help people every day. I run programs for children. I help seniors learn to use computers. That's so sweet, Ashley interrupted, not unkindly, but dismissively. Like community service, basically. That's really noble of you. Most people wouldn't want to do that kind of work for such little pay. One of Ashley's friends, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and what had to be $1,000 handbag, chimed in. I honestly don't know how people live on those salaries. Like, what do you do for fun? You can't travel or shop or anything. We find other ways to enjoy life, Lisa replied, but her words sounded defensive even to her own ears. And your husband? Another friend added, he works from home? What does he do exactly? He works in technology, Lisa said vaguely, not really wanting to get into the details with people who clearly weren't interested in actually understanding. Oh, like tech support? The first friend asked. My dad's company hires people for that. The pay is okay, I guess, for people who don't have degrees. Before Lisa could correct them, Ashley's attention had already shifted. Well, it's good that you're both able to make ends meet. I mean, not everyone can be successful. Someone has to do the regular jobs, right? The casual cruelty of the statement hit Lisa harder than any intentional insult could have. These people genuinely believed that her life, her choices, her happiness were somehow less than theirs simply because she didn't have money or status. She excused herself and headed toward the house, desperate for a moment alone. As she walked past small groups of guests, she caught snippets of conversation that made her realize she was already becoming the talk of the party. Did you see what she was wearing? I think that dress is from Target. Rebecca said she takes the bus to work. Can you imagine? Her husband doesn't even have a real office. Works from their apartment, apparently. Lisa found a quiet bathroom inside the house and locked herself in. She pulled out her phone and stared at it for a long moment. David had told her to call if she needed him, but she felt embarrassed to admit that she wanted to leave. She was an adult. She should be able to handle a few rude comments from family members. But as she stood there, looking at her reflection in the ornate bathroom mirror, she realized she wasn't just dealing with a few rude comments. This was systematic humiliation, and it was only getting worse. When she finally emerged from the bathroom, she found her Uncle Robert waiting near the door. Robert was Rebecca's husband, a successful businessman who owned several car dealerships across the state. He was a large man with a booming voice and an opinion about everything. "Lisa, there you are," he said, putting a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Rebecca told me about your situation. Listen, I want to help. What's your husband's name again? Daniel?" "David," Lisa corrected. "Right, David. Look, I'm always looking for good people. How would David like to come work for me? I need someone to manage my personal schedule, handle some correspondence, that sort of thing. It's not glamorous, but it pays better than whatever he's doing now, and it would give him some structure, you know? Get him out of the house, make him feel like he's actually contributing." Lisa felt a flash of anger. "David does contribute. He has a good job. We're doing fine." Robert laughed, not meanly, but in a way that showed he clearly didn't believe her. "Come on, Lisa, we're family. You don't have to put on a brave face. If you were doing fine, you wouldn't be wearing—" He gestured vaguely at her outfit. "Well, you'd have nicer things. Pride is one thing, but there's no shame in accepting help when you need it." "We don't need help," Lisa said firmly, though her voice was shaking. Sure, Robert said, patting her shoulder again. "Well, the offer stands. Have David send me his resume. I'm sure we can find something for him, even if he doesn't have much experience. Everyone's got to start somewhere, right?" He walked away before Lisa could respond, leaving her standing in the hallway feeling smaller than ever. She pulled out her phone and finally sent the text she'd been avoiding. "Can you come get me? I'm ready to leave." David's response came almost immediately. "On my way. Be there in 20 minutes. Lisa made her way back outside, intending to wait by the gate where she'd be less visible, but as she crossed the garden, Rebecca spotted her. "Leaving so soon?" Rebecca called out, her voice carrying across the lawn once again. "But we haven't even served dinner yet. Don't tell me you have to get home to cook for David. Doesn't he know how to take care of himself?" A few guests laughed. Lisa forced a smile. "He's coming to pick me up, actually." "Oh, that old Honda of his?" Rebecca said with a laugh. "Well, make sure he parks on the street. We don't want oil stains on the driveway." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Lisa felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give these people the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Actually," Aunt Patricia interjected, walking over with what she probably thought was a helpful expression, "before you go, let me grab those clothes I mentioned. They're in my car. It'll just take a second." "Really, Aunt Patricia, you don't have to." But Patricia was already walking toward the parking area, motioning for Lisa to follow. Lisa trailed behind reluctantly, aware that several guests were watching the exchange with interest. Patricia opened the trunk of her Mercedes and pulled out 2 large shopping bags. "Here," she said, thrusting them toward Lisa. "These are all designer. Some of them still have the tags on. I just don't wear them anymore. They're a bit dated, but they're better than—" She glanced at Lisa's dress. "Well, they're better." "I really can't accept—" "Nonsense," Patricia said firmly. "It's not charity, it's family helping family. Besides, what else am I going to do with them? Donate them to Goodwill? At least this way they stay in the family." Lisa took the bags because refusing seemed like it would cause more of a scene than accepting. She murmured her thanks and walked toward the gate, the heavy bags in her hands feeling like symbols of her humiliation. Rebecca followed her, still talking. "You know, Lisa, I've been thinking, you and David should really consider moving out to the suburbs. The city is so expensive. You could probably afford a nicer place out here, and David could get a proper job at one of the companies in the business park. I could even put in a good word for him somewhere. We like where we live," Lisa's aide, her patience finally wearing thin. "Of course you do," Rebecca said in that same condescending tone. "But sometimes we have to think practically rather than emotionally. I'm just trying to help. That's what family does." Lisa was saved from having to respond by the sound of a car approaching, but it wasn't the old Honda she was expecting. Instead, a sleek black Rolls-Royce turned onto the street, its polished surface gleaming in the late afternoon sun. The guests near the gate began whispering among themselves, craning their necks to see who could possibly be arriving in such an impressive vehicle. Even Rebecca stopped mid-sentence, her attention drawn to the luxury car pulling up to her house. The car came to a smooth stop right in front of the gate. A uniformed chauffeur stepped out from the driver's side and walked around to open the rear passenger door. And that's when David stepped out. But he didn't look like the David that Lisa was used to seeing. Gone were the sweatpants and old t-shirts. Instead, he wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. His hair was neatly styled, and he wore an expensive watch that caught the light. He looked like he had just stepped out of a board meeting at a Fortune 500 company. The entire party had gone silent. Everyone was staring at the man who had emerged from the Rolls-Royce, trying to figure out who he was and why he was there. David's eyes found Lisa in the crowd, and he smiled. It was the same warm, genuine smile she saw every day, but somehow it looked different framed by the expensive suit and the luxury car behind him. He walked toward her with confident strides, and the crowd parted to let him through. Rebecca was the first to find her voice. Though it came out slightly higher pitched than usual, she stepped forward, smoothing down her designer dress and putting on her most charming smile. The same smile she used when meeting important people at charity galas and business functions. "Hello there," she said brightly, extending her hand. "I'm Rebecca, the hostess of this party. Are you perhaps lost? This is a private residence, though I can certainly understand the confusion. These suburban streets can be quite confusing if you're not familiar with the area." David took her hand and shook it politely. "Actually, I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm here to pick up my wife." Rebecca's smile faltered for just a moment. "Your wife? And who might that be?" "Lisa," David said simply, his eyes still on Lisa, who stood frozen near the gate, trying to process what was happening. The color drained from Rebecca's face. "Lisa, you're married to Lisa?" "For 3 wonderful years," David confirmed, releasing Rebecca's hand and walking past her toward Lisa. The guests erupted in whispers. Phones were already being pulled out of pockets and purses. Rebecca looked like she had been slapped. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. David reached Lisa and gently took the shopping bags from her hands, handing them to the chauffeur who had followed at a respectful distance. "You won't be needing these," he said quietly to Lisa, then looked at Aunt Patricia. "Thank you for the gesture, but my wife has everything she needs." Aunt Patricia's face had gone bright red. She stammered something incomprehensible and quickly retreated back toward the house. Uncle Robert, however, pushed his way through the crowd, his face a mixture of confusion and sudden recognition. "Wait a minute," he said, staring at David. "I know you. Oh my God, you're David Chen. David Chen from Chen Technologies." The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Several people were now frantically typing on their phones, clearly searching for information. "That's right," David said calmly. "But that's impossible," Rebecca sputtered, finding her voice again. "Lisa's husband works from home in sweatpants. He drives an old Honda. He's just a regular." She trailed off as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Around her, guests were staring at their phone screens with expressions of shock and disbelief. One woman near the front of the crowd gasped audibly. David Chen founded Chen Technologies when he was 25. The company is worth billions. It says here his personal net worth is over $4 billion. Another guest chimed in, reading from her phone. He revolutionized cloud computing infrastructure. He's been on the cover of Forbes, Time magazine, and Tech Innovator Monthly. It says he's one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs under 40. A man in the back called out. He pledged half his fortune to literacy and education programs. Says here he donated $50 million last year alone. Rebecca looked like she might faint. Her carefully constructed world, where she was the wealthy, successful one, and Lisa was the poor relation who needed help, was crumbling around her. Ashley stood next to her mother, her mouth hanging open, her phone clutched in her hand. David paid no attention to any of them. He was focused entirely on Lisa. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Lisa nodded, though tears were now streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of relief and overwhelming emotion. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner," David said. "I got your text and came as fast as I could." "The suit," Lisa started to say. "I had a board meeting this morning," David explained. "I was going to change when I got home, but then I got your message." The car is from the company. I sometimes use it for important meetings. I thought maybe today qualified as important. He said all of this loud enough that the nearby guest could hear. The murmuring grew even louder. Rebecca finally seemed to shake off her shock. She rushed forward, her hands fluttering nervously. Mr. Chen, I had no idea. If I had known who you were, I would never have. That is to say, I would have. Would have what? David asked, his tone still polite but with an edge to it. Treated my wife with respect? I would hope you'd treat her with respect regardless of who I am or what I do for a living. Of course, Rebecca stammered. I was just joking around earlier. You know, family banter. Lisa knows I didn't mean anything by it. David turned to look at Rebecca fully for the first time. His expression wasn't angry, but it was firm. I heard what you said to her. I heard you call our life modest and simple like they were insults. I heard you offer her charity and hand-me-down clothes. I heard you suggest she was less than everyone here because she doesn't drive an expensive car or wear designer labels. Rebecca's face went from pale to red. I was just trying to help family. That's what we do. We look out for each other. Looking out for family means treating them with dignity and kindness, David replied. It means valuing them for who they are, not what they have. It means not using them as an example of failure to make yourself feel more successful. Ashley stepped forward, her voice small. Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. When I asked Lisa about her job, I didn't mean to be rude. I just thought, you thought her job was beneath you because it doesn't pay 6 figures, David said, not unkindly but directly. You assumed that because she works at a library and I work from home in comfortable clothes that we must be struggling. You judged us based on appearances without knowing anything about us. Uncle Robert tried to recover the situation. David, please let me apologize. If I had known who you were, I never would have offered you a job. That was incredibly presumptuous of me. In fact, I was wondering if you might have time to discuss a potential business opportunity. You see, I've been thinking about expanding my dealerships, and with someone of your business acumen. David held up a hand, cutting him off. I'm not interested in business opportunities right now, Robert. I'm interested in taking my wife home. He turned back to Lisa and spoke quietly, though his words were still audible to those nearby. When I met you, I was nobody. Just a guy with an idea and a laptop working 18-hour days from a tiny apartment. I had been living on ramen noodles and coffee for weeks. I hadn't had a haircut in months. I was wearing the same hoodie I'd worn for 3 days straight because I was too busy coding to do laundry. Lisa smiled through her tears, remembering that night at the book reading. You sat down next to me and started talking about books, David continued. You had no idea what I did for work. You didn't care that I looked like I'd been living in a cave. You just wanted to talk about stories and characters and ideas. When I asked you out for coffee, you insisted on paying for your own cup because you didn't want me to feel like it was a burden. Several people in the crowd were now openly crying. Even some of those who had been laughing at Lisa earlier looked uncomfortable. Over the next few months, as I was building my company, you never once asked me about money or success, David said. You asked me if I was eating enough, if I was sleeping, if I was happy. When the company started taking off and I could suddenly afford things, you told me not to change. You said you liked me exactly the way I was. He turned to address the crowd. My wife works at a library because she loves books and she loves helping people. She rides the bus because she doesn't see the point in adding another car to already congested city streets when public transportation works fine. She shops at discount stores because she's smart with money and doesn't see the value in paying more for a name brand when the quality is the same. David's voice grew stronger. We choose to live modestly because we believe money is a tool, not a measure of worth. We choose to give most of our wealth away to causes that matter, rather than spending it on things we don't need to impress people we don't like. We choose to live in a small apartment in the city because we love the neighborhood and the community there. Rebecca looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Several guests had quietly started moving toward their cars, clearly embarrassed to be associated with what had happened. Ashley was crying openly now. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was horrible to you. Everything I said was awful and wrong, and I have no excuse. Aunt Patricia had returned, her eyes red. I'm sorry too, Lisa. I thought I was being helpful, but I see now that I was just being condescending. You didn't need my old clothes or my pity. I'm ashamed of myself. Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably. I apologize as well. I made assumptions about your situation that were completely unfounded. It was inappropriate and disrespectful. One by one, relatives and guests began offering their apologies, each looking more uncomfortable than the last. The whole social dynamic of the party had flipped in a matter of minutes, but David wasn't finished. He turned back to Rebecca, who was now surrounded by whispering guests, all of whom had witnessed her humiliation. "Rebecca," David said, his voice calm but serious. "You wanted to help family, right? Here's how you can help. Take this as a lesson. The next time you meet someone, don't judge them by their clothes or their car or where they live. Judge them by how they treat others, by their kindness, their integrity, their character." Rebecca nodded mutely, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "The people who matter don't measure success by bank accounts and designer labels," David continued. "They measure it by the positive impact you have on the world, by the relationships you build, by the love you share." Lisa has more success in her little finger than most people achieve in a lifetime, because she makes the world a better place every single day. He took Lisa's hand. "And now, if you'll excuse us, we're going home." As they walked toward the Rolls-Royce, the chauffeur holding the door open, the entire party watched in silence. Rebecca stood frozen on her lawn, surrounded by guests who were all looking at her with varying degrees of disappointment and judgment. Just before getting into the car, Lisa turned back. She didn't look angry or vindictive. She just looked tired. "I hope you all have a nice evening," she said simply. David helped her into the car and climbed in after her. The chauffeur closed the door with a soft click, walked around to the driver's side, and smoothly pulled away from the curb. Inside the car, Lisa finally let out the breath she'd been holding. David pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me for treating you the way you deserve to be treated," David replied. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." "Why don't you ever talk about your work?" Lisa asked. "Why do you let people think we're struggling?" David was quiet for a moment. "Because I learned early on that when people know you have money, they treat you differently. They want things from you. They're nice to you for the wrong reasons. But you were nice to me when I was nobody, when I had nothing to offer you except conversation and bad jokes. That's when I knew you were special. That's when I knew I wanted to spend my life with you." Lisa looked up at him. "I would have loved you even if the company had failed. You know that, right?" "I do," David said with a smile. "That's exactly why I married you." As the car drove through the suburbs and back toward the city, Lisa's phone began buzzing incessantly. Text messages were flooding in from relatives, apologies, explanations, excuses. She turned the phone off and set it aside. "Do you think they learned anything?" she asked. "Some of them might have," David said thoughtfully. "People like Ashley and Patricia seemed genuinely sorry. Rebecca, I don't know. Sometimes people are too invested in their own worldview to really change. What do we do now?" "We go home," David said. "We order takeout from that Thai place you like. We sit on our old couch and watch a movie. We live our life exactly the way we want to, without worrying about what anyone else thinks." Lisa smiled. That sounded perfect. The next morning, Lisa woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. She had turned it back on before going to sleep, and apparently, the messages had continued throughout the night. She picked it up and scrolled through the notifications. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, 21 voicemails. Most of them were from Rebecca. David was already awake, sitting in the small living room with his laptop and a cup of coffee. He looked up when Lisa emerged from the bedroom. "How are you feeling?" "Honestly, I'm not sure," Lisa admitted, sitting down next to him on the couch. "My phone has been going crazy all night." "Mine too," David said. "I turned mine off around midnight. I figured whatever they had to say could wait until morning." Lisa opened the family group chat, something she rarely checked because it was usually just Rebecca sharing photos of her latest purchases, or Ashley bragging about her social life. But now it was filled with messages. Rebecca had sent a long paragraph at 2 in the morning. "Lisa, please forgive me. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what happened today and I'm so ashamed. I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to be helpful. Please call me. We need to talk. Family is everything," Ashley had written. "Lisa, I'm so sorry for everything I said. I was a terrible person today. I don't blame you if you never want to speak to me again, but I hope you can forgive me someday. What you do at the library is important work. Way more important than anything I'm doing. Aunt Patricia. Dear Lisa, I couldn't sleep last night. I kept thinking about those bags of clothes and how I must have made you feel. I was being condescending and awful. You didn't need my charity. You never did. I'm so sorry. There were similar messages from other relatives, some more sincere than others. Uncle Robert had sent a formal apology that read like it had been dictated to a secretary. A few cousins who had barely spoken to Lisa at the party were now claiming they had always admired her down-to-earth lifestyle and were sorry if she felt uncomfortable, but the most interesting message came from someone Lisa hadn't expected. It was from Rebecca's neighbor, a woman named Jennifer who had been at the party. She had sent a private message to Lisa. Hi Lisa, we haven't formally met, but I was at Rebecca's party yesterday. I just wanted to say that what your husband said really resonated with me. My family isn't wealthy like Rebecca's, and I always feel so judged at these neighborhood events. Watching you handle everything with such grace yesterday was inspiring. Also, I wanted you to know that the whole neighborhood is talking about what happened. Rebecca's reputation has taken quite a hit. People are saying she's shallow and cruel. I thought you should know. Lisa showed the message to David. He read it and shook his head. I didn't mean to destroy Rebecca's social standing. I just wanted her to understand that she was wrong. I know, Lisa said. But actions have consequences. She humiliated me in front of all those people. Now those same people see her differently. As the morning went on, more messages came in. Some were genuine apologies. Others were clearly motivated by the realization that they had mistreated someone connected to a billionaire. Lisa could tell the difference. Around 10 o'clock, Rebecca called. Lisa debated whether to answer, but ultimately decided she might as well get it over with. She put the phone on speaker so David could hear. Lisa, oh thank God you answered. Rebecca's voice came through, sounding tired and strained. I've been trying to reach you all night. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was awful to you. I was cruel and condescending, and I have no excuse for my behavior. You're right, you don't, Lisa said calmly. Rebecca made a sound that might have been a sob. I know. I've been thinking about it all night. The things I said to you, the way I treated you. It was inexcusable. I was showing off, trying to make myself look better by putting you down. And I hurt you. I hurt family. Why did you do it, Rebecca? Lisa asked. We used to be close when we were kids. What changed? There was a long pause. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice was quieter, more honest. I don't know. Maybe when I married into money, I started believing that's what made me valuable. That having expensive things and living in a big house made me better than other people. I got so caught up in impressing everyone that I forgot what actually matters. And what matters? Lisa prompted. Being a good person, Rebecca said. Treating people with kindness and respect. Being humble. All the things I used to know before I got so caught up in this superficial lifestyle. Lisa felt some of her anger softening, but she wasn't ready to let Rebecca off the hook completely. You didn't just treat me badly yesterday, Rebecca. You've been treating me badly for years. Every time we've gotten together, you've made little comments about my life, my choices, my appearance. Yesterday was just the worst example. I know, Rebecca said, and she sounded genuinely remorseful. I thought I was being funny or clever, but I was just being mean. And the worst part is I was probably jealous. Jealous? Lisa was surprised. Of what? Of the fact that you're genuinely happy, Rebecca admitted. You have a husband who adores you, a job you love, a simple life that brings you joy. Meanwhile, I'm living in a house that's too big, throwing parties for people I don't even like, trying to compete with neighbors who are just as miserable as I am. When you walked into my party yesterday looking so uncomfortable, I pounced on it because it made me feel better about my own life, and that's terrible. That makes me a terrible person. Lisa didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected this level of honesty from Rebecca. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, Rebecca continued. I know I need to earn that, but I want to try to be better. I want to be the kind of person who builds people up instead of tearing them down. I want to be the cousin you used to know before I let money and status corrupt me. That's going to take time, Lisa said, and real change, not just words. I understand, Rebecca said. I'll do whatever it takes, and Lisa, tell David I'm sorry too. He had every right to call me out. Everything he said was true. I needed to hear it. After they hung up, Lisa sat in silence for a moment. David put his arm around her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that maybe some good came from yesterday after all, Lisa said. If Rebecca really means what she says, maybe this will be a turning point for her. Do you believe she means it? David asked. I think she believes she means it right now, Lisa said carefully. Whether she follows through is another story. But I guess we'll see. Over the next few days, the messages continued, but they started to taper off. Most of the relatives seemed content to offer their apologies via text and then pretend nothing had happened. But a few reached out with more substantial efforts. Ashley called and asked if she could take Lisa to lunch. Lisa agreed, curious to see if the young woman's remorse was genuine. They met at a small cafe near the library, far from the expensive restaurants Ashley usually frequented. Ashley looked different. She was dressed more casually, without the designer labels prominently displayed. She looked younger, less polished, more real. Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Ashley said as they sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, Lisa admitted. But I figured I should give you a chance to say whatever you want to say in person. Ashley took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the party, about the way I was raised, the values I was taught. My mom always emphasized appearances and status. I grew up believing that success meant having money and showing it off. That people without money were less important, less intelligent, less valuable. That's a pretty toxic worldview, Lisa said. I know that now, Ashley said. But when it's all you've ever known, you don't question it. You just accept it as truth. Watching your husband dismantle that worldview in about 5 minutes was eye-opening and humbling. What made you want to meet with me? Lisa asked. Because I want to change, Ashley said earnestly. I don't want to be like my mother was at that party. I don't want to be someone who judges people by their clothes or their cars. I want to be someone who sees value in people, real value, and I thought maybe you could help me understand how to do that. Lisa was touched by the sincerity in Ashley's voice. It's not complicated, Ashley. You just have to remember that everyone you meet is fighting their own battles, pursuing their own dreams, living their own lives. Their worth doesn't come from external things. It comes from who they are inside. Like you, Ashley said. You have this quiet strength. You stood there while my mother humiliated you, and you didn't fight back or cause a scene. You just maintained your dignity. That's real strength. I didn't feel very strong, Lisa admitted. I felt small and embarrassed. But you didn't let it break you, Ashley pointed out. You didn't lash out or sink to her level. That takes character. That's something all the money in the world can't buy. They talked for over an hour, and by the end of it, Lisa felt like she was seeing a different side of Ashley. Maybe there was hope for her after all. Meanwhile, David was dealing with his own fallout from the party. Word had spread through his business circles about what had happened. Several tech news blogs had picked up the story, titling it things like, Billionaire CEO defends wife from family criticism, and tech giant David Chen values character over cash. His board of directors called an emergency meeting. Worried about the publicity, David assured them that nothing in the story reflected poorly on the company. In fact, his assistant informed him that public perception of him had actually improved. People appreciated seeing a wealthy CEO who valued humility and defended his spouse. But the most significant outcome came from an unexpected source. The library where Lisa worked received an anonymous donation, $5 million, earmarked specifically for literacy programs, technology upgrades, and salary increases for the staff. Lisa's boss called her into the office the day the donation came through. Lisa, did you know anything about this? No, Lisa said honestly. She had her suspicions about who might be behind it, but technically she didn't know. Well, this is going to change everything for us, her boss said, tears in her eyes. We can finally launch that children's reading program we've been dreaming about. We can update our computer systems. We can give our staff the raises they deserve. This is incredible. That evening, Lisa confronted David. Did you donate $5 million to my library? David looked up from his laptop with an innocent expression. I have no idea what you're talking about, David. It was an anonymous donation, he said with a smile. Could have come from anyone. It came from the Chen Foundation, Lisa said. I saw the paperwork. Well, the foundation makes lots of donations, David said, still smiling. It's kind of our thing. Lisa couldn't help but smile back. Thank you. This is going to make such a difference. You make a difference every day, David said. This just helps you do it on a bigger scale. A week after the party, Rebecca sent one more message. This time it wasn't an apology. It was an announcement. She was organizing a fundraiser for local charities, and she wanted Lisa's input on which organizations would benefit most from the donations. She also mentioned that she had been volunteering at a food bank and finding it surprisingly fulfilling. "Do you think she's really changing?" Lisa asked David as she showed him the message. "Hard to say," David said, "but she's making an effort. That's more than some people would do." "Should I help her with the fundraiser?" "Do you want to?" Lisa thought about it. "Yeah, I think I do. If she's genuinely trying to be better, I should support that." Over the following weeks, Lisa and Rebecca worked together on the fundraiser. It was awkward at first, but gradually they began to rebuild their relationship. Rebecca was different now, less focused on impressing people and more focused on actually helping them. She asked Lisa real questions about her work and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. The fundraiser was a success, raising over $200,000 for various local charities. Rebecca gave a speech at the event, and to Lisa's surprise, she mentioned the party. "A few weeks ago, I learned a valuable lesson about what really matters in life," Rebecca told the crowd. "I learned that success isn't measured by bank accounts or designer labels. It's measured by the positive impact we have on others. I'm grateful to my cousin Lisa for showing me, through her example, what it means to live a life of purpose and meaning." After the event, Rebecca pulled Lisa aside. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I know I didn't deserve it. Everyone deserves a chance to be better," Lisa said. "The question is whether they take it. I'm going to keep trying," Rebecca promised. Every day. As Lisa and David drove home that night, Lisa reflected on everything that had happened. The humiliation at the party had been painful, but it had led to unexpected positive changes. Rebecca was examining her values and trying to be better. Ashley was questioning the shallow worldview she'd been raised with. And Lisa had been reminded of something important. Her worth didn't depend on other people's opinions. "You know what?" Lisa said to David. "I'm glad everything happened the way it did." "Really?" David looked surprised. "Really," Lisa confirmed. "Because sometimes people need to be shaken up before they can grow. And I think that party shook up a lot of people." David smiled and took her hand. "You're pretty wise, you know that." "I learned from the best," Lisa said, squeezing his hand back. They drove home through the city streets, past the bright lights and busy sidewalks, back to their small apartment and their simple life. And Lisa realized that she wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.